Hello and welcome to another episode of Chuchu is a Ranker, and on this episode we are going to be discussing the discography of the English rock band Dire Straits. Formed in London in 1977, the band initially consisted of Mark Knopfler on lead vocals and lead guitar, David Knopfler on rhythm guitar, John Illsley on bass and Pick Withers on drums. During their lifetime, the band saw many lineup changes, with Mark Knopfler and John Illsley being the only consistent members in every incarnation. The band initially operated between 1977 and 1988, releasing 5 studio albums, becoming one of the biggest selling rock bands in the world. The group disbanded in 1988 due to Mark Knopfler's disenchantment, but the band were reformed in 1990, releasing one final album before breaking up permanently in 1995, as Mark Knopfler set out on a full-time solo career. And as for my own fandom, well, there is none. Although I've heard most of the band's discography in little fits and starts over the years, I would still consider Dire Straits to be an almost complete unknown to me. So, without further ado, let's be complete rankers and rank up a storm. These are the studio albums of Dire Straits, ranked from worst to best. So, we're going to be kicking off this list with On Every Street from 1991, which was the band's 6th and final LP. And this album saw the band reuniting after a 6-year disbandment to a diminished audience and apathetic critical response. That said, the LP still hit number 1 on the UK albums chart and went on to sell over 15 million copies worldwide, so it wasn't a total failure. However, the fallout over this record was enough to convince Mark Knopfler that Dire Straits had had their day, and he permanently axed the band for good in 1995. Stylistically, On Every Street continues on pretty much from where Brothers in Arms left off. It contains less overt 1980s elements for sure, but the same type of mainstream rock songwriting is employed here, with the album's combo of laid-back grooves and barroom rockers feeling instantly familiar. But the record isn't as successful as its world-conquering predecessor. While it does have an impressive amount of variety across the track list, On Every Street feels noticeably disjointed. The songs on offer here never really coalesce into a cohesive whole, feeling more like a ragtag compilation of songs than a proper studio album, which is something Dire Straits had been good at up until this point. This is compounded by the fact that the record is also too long, sailing past the hour mark, which officially makes it the band's longest release. Plus there are a couple of obligatory duffers hiding in the bushes. When It Comes to You is about as anodyne a pop rocker as you could ever hope to avoid. My Parties is a fairly dire slice of yacht rock with an unappealing spoken word vocal, while Planet New Orleans suffers from bad sequencing. It's actually a competent atmosphere-driven tune, but comes right at the time when the album starts to drag and you just really don't want to hear another 7-minute epic. These faults are a shame because there are actually many enjoyable tunes to dig into. Opener Calling Elvis is decent, sounding like a fun if slightly less attractive cousin to Money for Nothing. Title track On Every Street keeps you waiting for its jangly payoff, but when it finally comes it's lovely. The delocorously smoky jazz ballad, Fade to Black, nicely hits its mark. You and Your Friends sinks into a sea of velveteen organ and laid-back guitar licks. It's Dire Straits 101, but in a good way. Heavy Fuel is a good bit of bouncing rock and roll fun, while Ticket to Heaven is great with his 1960s Blue Hawaii groove and seaside balladry. So yeah, despite it still languishing at the bottom of the Dire Straits pile due to overlength, lack of cohesion and an occasionally shaky tune, On Every Street is not nearly the total dog that its ignominious reputation would have you believe. In fact, overall, I'd say this LP shakes out as pretty good, with the individual songs hitting their targets more often than not. 3.5 stars. Next up we have Making Movies from 1980, which was the band's 3rd LP, and this saw the band steer away from the ornate bluesy stylings of the first 2 records into a more direct MOR soft rock and pop vein, mostly setting aside the languorous instrumental passages and concentrating on simple hit power and catchiness. As such, I feel like Making Movies is a bit of a transitional album that feels like the band having to learn how to walk again in a completely different style. In a way, it feels almost like another debut LP for the band. And yeah, when this album works, it produces some of the band's best tunes, but on the flip side, there are a few cuts on this that feel a bit embryonic or just missing an indefinable something. Although it's one of the band's more famous tunes, to me Romeo and Juliet feels a bit fractured and incomplete. It's not an explicitly bad tune, in fact it's nice and relaxing, but I also feel like it never really gets out of first gear. To my ears, the song just kinda sounds unfinished. It always seems to be leading up to a climax that ultimately never comes. Despite its cool skittering drums, Skateaway also feels a bit off. The chorus tries to go for the catchy jugular, but it feels forced and not well integrated, like the band are putting in maximum effort for minimum results, while Hand in Hand collapses in on itself in a heap of MOR paint-by-numbers balladry. The record is called Making Movies, but if that song was a movie, it would be a bloody boring one. Thankfully, everything else on this 7-track, 38-minute offering is pretty darn good. Opener Tunnel of Love shows off the album's more pop-orientated leanings with its radio-ready chorus and straight-ahead rock assault, as Mark Knopfler purrs, "Getting crazy on the waltzes," later adding, "I put my hand on the lever, said let it rock and let it roll, I had the one-arm bandit fever." Jesus Christ! Rubbing one off on the waltzes is extreme. It makes you wonder what kind of sick shit he gets up to in the tunnel itself. On a more serious note though, that lift-off at the end of the song absolutely slaps. Espresso Love forks over a slice of simple pub rock energy with its growling guitar tones and stomping pace. Solid Rock has a good toe-tapping thrust to it, although when Mark starts shouting, "I'm laying solid rock," it does sound like he's bragging about a banging shies he's currently in the process of taking. While closer Les Boys turns on the Kinksy and vaudeville vibes to superb effect and makes for something completely different and refreshing from the band. So yeah, because of the album's basic rock and pop bent, Making Movies has to rely on the quality of its individual songs, and the math works out as something like this. 2 of them are great, 2 of them are pretty good, and 3 of them are a bit wobbly, so ultimately the inconsistency does let the side down a bit here. But when all is said and done, I still do like the record, even though I don't entirely love it. 3.5 stars.
Can't do the talk, like the talk on the TV, and I can't do a love song like the way it's meant to be. I can't do everything, but I'll do anything for you. Can't do anything except be in love with you.
Next up, we have the band's self-titled debut LP from 1978. Powered by the UK and US top 10 single Sultans of Swing, this debut from Dire Straits blasted the band out of the gates and immediately into the rock mainstream. And here the band are at their most pub rock blues orientated, with most of the songs leaning heavily on Mark Knopfler's technically impressive guitar solos. In a way, you could complain that the entire album sounds like Knopfler wanking off his fretboard and not really giving his bandmates much room to maneuver. Then again, because he's such an insanely talented guitarist, who really gives a shit? Hearing him go apeshit all over this record is very entertaining indeed. And to that end, if you're only coming to the table for those sweet guitar licks, then this debut album will likely forever be your favourite of the Dire Straits works, as it's easily the guitarist's most full-throttle showcase. The album also has a good rhythmic swagger to it. This aspect saves a few of the weaker cuts, most notably the likes of Setting Me Up, Southbound Again and In the Gallery. Those tunes are kind of rote, interchangeable blues rockers that lack distinctive hooks, but that rhythmic swagger and the sense of urgency it brings makes the tunes more palatable. I would almost go as far as to say youthful energy, but there doesn't seem to be anything youthful about Mark Knopfler whatsoever. I think he probably came out of his mother's womb prematurely balding. But otherwise, the record is stuffed with good material. Opener Down on the Waterline instantly sets the tone with its parade of world-class guitar licks. Water of Love has swarms of beautiful steel string guitar trills infesting its country rock balladry. Six Blade Knife sees Knopfler affecting a super raspy vocal style that makes him sound exactly like Peter Parrott. Plus he forks over oodles of fantastic sanguine guitar riffs. Sultans of Swing, of course, is a slice of iconic badassery. Its lyrics about the love of playing live, even if it's only to 3 people in the backwater shithole, nicely augmenting its incredible guitar pyrotechnics. Wild West End, meanwhile, is gorgeous with its appealingly gentle acoustic guitars and swooning chorus, while Lions is a great closer that houses some nice backing vocals and a memorable stuttering guitar performance. So yeah, while not the most subtle or most lyrically compelling of the band's works, this debut LP still scores points for its rough energy and brazen virtuoso guitar playing. I mean, let's be honest, the first thing that probably springs to mind when you think about Dire Straits is Mark Knopfler in his headband playing cock rock guitar solos. And yeah, this is pretty much exactly that. Giving the people what they want, I guess. 4 stars.
guitar George, he knows all the chords. But it's strictly rhythm, he doesn't want to make it cry or sing.
Next up we have Communique from 1979, which was the band's second LP. And strangely, this album catches a lot of flack from the critics for being a lesser replication of the band's debut, which is something I just don't get. For me, Communique is a substantially different album that is, at its very base, almost a total 180 from the first record, at least tonally speaking. Whereas the debut was a swaggering rough and tumble pop rock record, Communique is much more measured, deliberate and notably melancholy, which is something that Dire Straits rarely get enough credit for. The band do have a good emotional core to their music, and this LP really puts it out there on display. That said, you still get the usual helping of superb guitar licks and catchy choruses, only this time they're delivered in a more atmospherically salient way. Of course, whether you prefer the throatiness of the debut or the languid sadness of Communique is a totally subjective thing, and to that end, for me, it just simply comes down to the individual songs. And while I definitely seem to be in the minority on this point, Communique simply has more songs on it that I personally really enjoy. Once Upon a Time in the West nicely shows off the album's more languorous vibes via its laid-back country vibes and hoary barroom vocal work. News has a molasses pace, some beautiful atmospheric touches and interesting self-destructive lyrics to pick through. Where Do You Think You're Going is gorgeous with this acoustic strum along that picks up very nicely indeed towards the climax. Lady Writer throws a bit of pace into the mix and impresses with its lightning speed guitar fills, while Angel of Mercy really reminds me of the Kinks during the Sleepwalker phase, which is quite the compliment. But the tune's warm jangle pop is quite lovely. So yeah, throw in the bopping Billy Joel-esque title track, the acoustic shimmy of Portobello Bell, and the smooth ear-catching guitar licks of Single Handed, and you have a great addition to the band's discography that's highly underrated in my opinion. 4 stars. Next up we have Love Over Gold from 1982, which was the band's 4th LP. And this album saw the band turn in a proggy, atmosphere-soaked direction that put long instrumental passages and atmospheric texturing front and centre. As such, Love Over Gold is a bit of an outlier in the band's catalogue that doesn't really sound like anything else the group made before or since. But they certainly did a good job here, as the album pretty much nails the atmospheric vibe it was aiming for. The record feels sad and stormy and even a little bit ominous at times. Basically, the feel of this LP is perfectly captured by its artwork. There's also no dead wood on the record, as each of its 5 songs plays into the cohesive whole and maintains the same atmosphere. In fact, the entire album feels like a homogenized whole rather than the sequence of individual tunes. Opener Telegraph Road is beautiful with its 14-minute plus dive into classical piano and proggy atmospherics, and of course the runaway guitar soloing is rad. Lead single Private Investigations is awesome. It has a sorrowful vibe, gorgeous acoustic guitar trills, and a memorable spoken word vocal that totally fits the languid feel of the music. Industrial Disease is a fun addition that sees Mark Knopfler sounding exactly like Ray Davies. Plus the keyboard riff really sounds like a dry run for the band's later hit Walk of Life. The atmospherically rich title track Love Over Gold has lots of subtle texturing running through its lush balladry, while closer It Never Rains picks up considerably when Mark starts soloing like a total nutter during the song's finale. So yeah, Love Over Gold is a great album of atmospheric prog that scratches a specific kind of itch. Because of its more ambient leanings, it will never be the band's most accessible work, but it is arguably their most adventurous and artistically grand one. 4.5 stars. So here we are at the top of the mountain, and the Dire Straits gold medal is going to go to Brothers in Arms from 1985, which was the band's 5th LP. And of course, the record was a huge smash hit all around the world, eventually selling over 30 million copies, making it one of the biggest selling albums of all time. The record also scored 2 top 10 singles in the UK and a number 1 hit in the US via Money for Nothing. Stylistically, Brothers in Arms represents the moment where Dire Straits properly acknowledged the fact that they're living in the 1980s, incorporating many elements of that decade's cheesiness and just going all in on super accessible radio-ready pop rock. And it's fantastic as the band fork over great tune after great tune. In fact, the only slight speed bump the LP offers up is the track Your Latest Trick, which pushes things a little too far into trumpet-laced MOR easy listening territory. Personally, I would have left that one off the record, but everything else on Brothers in Arms is gangbusters. Highlights from a Ram tracklist includes the opening So Far Away, which is a gently melancholy ballad that kicks the record off with a surprising amount of tenderness. Money for Nothing slaps with its proggy ramp-up intro, super catchy vocal lines, and robotic-sounding guitar riffage that pulses in an enjoyably iconic kind of way. Walk of Life is one of the band's catchiest pop tunes with its famous keyboard riff and upbeat rockabilly swing energy. Why Worry is a lovely lullaby that soaks up its power from Knopfler's simple yet super melodic pick guitar lines. While the closing title track, Brothers in Arms, is rad with its mournful organs and stunning guitar solos, bringing out a wealth of emotion from its lyrical tales of the bonds of friendship born from the hardships of the battlefield. Mwah! Chef's kiss, I absolutely adore that song. So yeah, throw in the fun tour of 1980s cheesiness that is Right Across the River, the stormy acoustics of The Man's Too Strong, and the short, sharp, energetic rock of One World, and you have a nearly flawless album of 1980s rock and pop that hits all the catchy and emotive beats that you could ever want from a Dire Straits record. 5 stars! So, now my deep dive is finished, the question remains, did I gain more appreciation for the artist? And the answer is obviously yes. I went from a baseline of basically 0 to enjoying the band a good bit. I don't think Dire Straits are destined to be a favourite artist of all time for me, but I do think that the discography is pretty consistent. And that's my list, but of course I know that won't be your list, so why not sound off in the comments and tell me how you'd rank these records. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and all that other kind of YouTube jazz. Make sure to take care of yourself, but most importantly, just keep on ranking!
The sun's gone to hell. You got the moon riding high.